Hi, you're listening to Engagement Drivers, presented by EveryoneSocial. Each week, we'll share actionable tips, strategies, and success stories that you and your teams can use to steer your brand, social, and employee engagement in the right direction.
Hey everybody, Todd here, Director of Marketing at EveryoneSocial. Back with another solo episode in the new year here. We will have some new interviews coming up, which we are very excited about, and hopefully continuing to bring you just new great content on our podcast. This week, we wanted to talk about why employee advocacy programs fail, or why you try to get employees to share and create content on behalf of your brand, and it doesn't work the way you anticipate. We've been around for, a decade now, and we've seen so many different things happen. And, we want to make sure that companies who are either doing this manually, have their own process, or maybe are using a tool like EveryoneSocial. We just want to make sure everyone is successful in this, because we've seen the power and the results that can generate from doing this right. And you might have different terminologies for this. Employee advocacy is a common name. But there's so many different variations of this word. So whether you are familiar with employee influencer program, employee activation program, employee amplification program, social selling program, these are all pretty interchangeable to what we're going to talk about today. So definitely want to dive into this bit. Hopefully it's super helpful. If you want to dive into the content a lot further than what I'm going to talk about, we actually have a great blog post that covers all of this that I think will be helpful as you explore this kind of new process in the new year here. So let's get into it. So one of the reasons why we're really excited about this topic too is that, we have seen more and more people talking about the power of encouraging employees to build their personal brand, to share, create, and engage with content on a consistent basis. And it's funny how over the years, the idea that, hey, social media at work is a big no-no and you can get in serious trouble has now turned into, this is actually something we should all be doing and should be part of our culture. And we've known this for years. Like, we've seen the power of it, right? We know paid advertising, for example, and paid media is just getting more and more expensive. It's still useful to put into your marketing mix. However, the reach, the results, they're all diminishing while the costs are continuing to rise. And people have just continued to get more smart about the fact that they know these are ads, they tune them out. We're bombarded with things every day. And people just want to connect and learn from people they know and trust in their networks. And we've seen this happen more and more. So naturally, we know this stuff is very important. And, this also goes beyond just sharing on social media. It's also just a way to build community and trust for your organization. And of course, you want to help your people, give them career, professional opportunities, helps them build their personal brand. Just myself, from sharing and creating content through EveryoneSocial and manually as well, I have gotten more connections. I've grown my network with new like-minded people. I've gotten opportunities to speak on podcasts, and I get recruiters to hit me up all the time. Now, I have no intention of leaving EveryoneSocial because I'm very excited about what we're building here. So I do tend to turn those down, but this is what I'm saying is you're giving people more opportunities to just be seen and heard, which is fantastic. And I look at it as that every employee and every person in the company should have a piece to the success of the company. You should want them to share their vision, their views, being a voice of the company. And it just empowers people more when they feel like they're being heard and that they know they're contributing to the company's success. Talk about what companies actually do wrong when they approach this strategy, right? And it's totally understandable that these things can happen because it's still a growing concept. People are still trying to figure out what's the best way to not only engage the people in the right way, but ensure that it's a two-way street, right? That your employees are benefiting, but the company is also benefiting, right? Because that's pretty much why you would implement something like this at your organization. But a lot of things happen too, where, you first come across this idea and this strategy, you get really excited, you put something in place and it just fails. And you're like, what happened here? Does this just not work? What am I doing wrong? And fortunately, like I said, we've been in this game for so long that we've seen it all, and we can step in pretty quickly for anyone who decides to maybe work with us with exactly the thoughts and things we've seen to make sure that right from day one, you're successful. And then we have that support team there that's really going to show you, like, don't do it this way. Think about it, how you should tailor this message, right? Or how to get more engagement, things like that. And the exciting thing is it doesn't have to be expensive, right? We have recently just launched our self-serve platform too. You now have our starter plan, which is free forever. So you can use and build your employee advocacy program for free. But if you need certain features and tools from the product, we also have a Teams plan, which you get a 2-week free trial. And then you can choose to upgrade or you can just downgrade to the free forever plan, or you go with our enterprise plan, which just gives you all the things you need, the team support and an actual better cost per user too. So if you're interested in that, definitely check out our pricing page. You can get signed up for free just to try out the product if you want first. No credit card required, which is fantastic because we know how sometimes people like to sneak that in and then you forget about your plan, you start getting charged. We want to avoid that, right? We want you to actually engage with the product and see the value from day one. So that said, I love to get into this common employee advocacy mistakes or mistakes that people make when they're trying to get their employees to share on social media. And there's quite a few, and there's different reasons for each one. And one of the things is we want A, help you avoid these issues and kind of position your mindset a little differently, and then be there to support you, once you kind of dive in. So let's get into it. So one of the first common mistakes that companies make and or assumptions that people who are looking to sign up for this is thinking that this social program will fix your work culture. Now, it can definitely help. You're getting engagement, you're informing people much easier, you're building this community hub for people to meet, share, create, which is great, but it won't fix all your cultural issues. And if you have a lot of rough culture and or challenges with leadership, whatever it may be, those are things you want to work on simultaneously with doing this, because as you work on it, people will be more inclined to actually get involved in the program. Personally, if I had worked for a company where the culture just wasn't great, or I didn't trust the way the business was being run, why would I advocate or get involved in a program that would be beneficial to the company? While it might benefit me a bit, I'm thinking, well, why would I get involved? Like, I don't care about this company. So if you have work culture issues, that's a great place to start. And just remember that throwing this program together and thinking that your work culture is just going to be top notch is the wrong mindset to have. And you'll be sorely disappointed when those results don't happen. Another common mistake that people make is that social programs like this should only include company content and news. Look, these are important things to have, no doubt. Again, part of the program is that 50% of it you want it to be so it helps your company grow, whether that's through marketing, like driving revenue and leads and saving you money on paid media and helping sales win more, extending your brand reach. Maybe it's for employer branding and recruiting, trying to hire top talent and get people in your recruiting pipeline. Or maybe it's to help improve communications, right? It's to get these messages internally to your people to hopefully share out ones that are required. But often the thought is these programs become too self-centered and that the only content that's included is like links about your company or PR about your company or blog posts from your company. You want to mix in other things too, right? People forget about the power of user-generated content. Let employees create and share things, but also what is interesting to different groups of people, right? We have third-party resources in our own use of our platform from trusted marketing sources, from trusted sales sources, from trusted recruiting and business sources. We mix in not just links, but text-based posts, image posts, GIFs, videos for consumptions. You want a mix of these things, right? And this is what gets your people not only interested in the program, but also helps build their expertise in thought leadership without looking like they're just there to sell your company. And again, you want to do those things too. But again, people understand what you're trying to do. Audiences are smarter and they can totally see a thinly veiled promotional pitch for a product instead of something that provides value to them that they could come back and trust your content and maybe eventually become a buyer. And buyers are smarter, just like anyone else in general audiences. Even people who are doing research, they're going to have multiple touch points with content. They're going to get familiar with your employees or people in their feeds. Those are the things that are going to guide them to your product and or service, whatever it may be. Another mistake people make is thinking that content sharing is the only piece that matters for employee advocacy success. Certainly sharing is important and it's always going to be a big component to an employee advocacy program. But people forget about the engagement side of things, right? Being able to drop company content or employee content that others can engage with to help it either trend or get attention on the post, but also internally in the program, right? You want a lot of internal content that's for consumption. That's how you boost your internal marketing too and getting people on the right page. And you want them coming back to the program and consistently using it. If you're paying for something and wanting to drive attention, engagement is one of the most important things, beyond adoption of the program. So having to get out of that mindset that it's only a sharing tool, it's not. Another mistake we also see companies make is just providing zero guidance around social media, networking, community. Look, a lot of people have grown up with social media, right? Or became a part of it right when it was taking off. But not everybody's an expert. Not everybody knows marketing. Not everyone knows social media necessarily. Everyone understands what it's about technically, but not everyone's going to be a pro. And that's okay. The same with networking, the same with building a community. These are things you learn over time. But often companies want to put something in place, just say, here, everybody, go. but nobody knows what to do, why they're doing it, or how to successfully do it without either being spammy, or maybe, you do work in a regulated industry where you do have to be careful about certain things you're sharing. We see it too often. And this is where social media policy becomes important. It doesn't have to be super in depth. It should be easy to understand, accessible, and people should know what it's all about. But if you're going to be involved in some kind of program like this, it needs to be part of the culture. We've actually had a few customers who have said, look, this is part of our culture. If you're here, this is what we do. We can't force you to get involved, but we would encourage you and love you to get involved and start being a part of this, and we'll show you how. It shows you're not only investing in, their future, their career, but their onboarding experience and helping them become part of your tribe, basically, right? So we always say, like, provide these details, provide workshops. Maybe it's a recurring monthly webinar that anybody who is joining this program can attend. Maybe it's an onboarding thing. There's multiple things you can do, but the mistake is that you're not providing any future guidance. Another mistake we see is just thinking that executive buy-in isn't critical, or that leaders just don't need to be active on social. They're the face of the company, and we want all employees to be the face of the company, but a lot of times people might be hesitant or not sure about doing this. But if they see their managers or leadership or the executive founding team of your company consistently sharing or creating content, it kind of gives you the nudge to say, okay, like, this is okay to do. We should get involved, be a part of the conversation. And hopefully it makes you feel a little more comfortable that your executives don't see social as like this secondary thing, or that it's not important. And the best programs we've seen is when the executives get it. One of our companies in the Fortune 500, the CEO releases a video internally to the company every so often to get people to see the value and why they're doing this, what they hope to achieve from it, and that they want to learn from others of what they can improve the program. And the engagement is huge in there. And they have a lot of people sharing and creating because of that. So executive buy-in is pretty important. And they also put more of an emphasis on the program when they get it. If they understand it, they see the value, they're going to make it a priority. And too often we've also seen where it's like, okay, that sounds cool, I still don't really get it. And then the program just doesn't take off like it should. And it's going to be hard to find success that way. And one of the jobs, I think, for anyone who's looking to do this kind of program is going to be really making the case for it, right? And fortunately, there's so many great data points, so many businesses and customers of ours even who have had amazing results. I think as long as you're prepared with that and can kind of justify it and say, like, this is the support I need, this is what the plan will be, you'll have a better chance of getting executive buy-in. Now, that won't always work. There always will be some executives or leadership who just will never understand it. And that's just going to be a hard sell no matter what. The other mistake we see, or just kind of assumption, is that, hey, I can purchase a tool, do the basic setup, and then not really nurture it, and it's just going to lead to results and highly engaged employees. I think with anything in a process is that you want to make it easy for people, for sure. And again, it's why we built our product the way we did. The self-serve option, for example, it gets you up and running in just a couple minutes, which is fantastic. The challenge is that people don't nurture the program to keep it consistent. And it's not that it needs to take hours and hours a day. We've seen companies who are hiring somebody specifically for employee advocacy, and those are large companies who are taking this incredibly seriously and really put a lot of emphasis on the program. And that's awesome to see. But a lot of companies can't necessarily do that yet, or still too new to really understand if this is the right approach. However, you could spend 15, 20 minutes a day during the week, and that'll be enough to keep content flowing, to keep engagement growing, and to keep employees actively involved. It doesn't need to take 8 hours a day. Now it can, like I mentioned, and again, those are more robust programs, but you can easily find success just by spending a few minutes each workday. There will be some initial work involved in the beginning, for sure. Like, you're going to have to think about how you want your program set up, who you might invite first, maybe some training materials in the beginning, right? If you work with a vendor like us, we work with you to make sure you have what you need and the support, understanding the features. There's different parts involved. But once that stuff is set up, the daily management is really not intense. But too often people think they can just buy this tool, set it, forget it, and it'll just work itself out. And like anything, it's not how it works. You're going to have to put in some work, but trust us, you'll be happy with the results. Another mistake people make when looking at their employee advocacy programs or launching something like this is neglecting the creation of a content strategy. Content's very important, obviously, for this too. Not only the external content you plan on sharing, but internal content and the communications you're going to have. What is your strategy going to evolve, right? How are you going to use the email newsletter functionality? Will you use push notifications? Will you use different functionalities of the product that will help content stand out? Too often we don't think about these things. I've seen it happen, right? You get into this, okay, well, we'll have the RSS feeds pull in and maybe some keywords and that's that. It's like, know, like, what do your people want to be known for? What kind of information you're trying to get out there? Depending on your strategy of the program, if it's very employer branding and recruiting focused, your content strategy needs to be focused on that side of things. If it's more company wide, then you have multiple groups of different strategies you're trying to create, and that's totally cool. But it all comes down to you actually need to make and think about your content strategy for your program. And the last mistake we kind of see too, which kind of ties into one of the previous ones, is restricting the employee voice in all content and forgetting the power of user-generated content. So understandably too, like, look, not everybody knows how to copyright perfectly. Not everybody knows exactly what to say. And the benefit of using a program is you can put this kind of copy in the shares so that people have either can A, use that, or B, it uses that as a guideline to kind of put their own voice into it. But if you use a program, like, look, one of the features we have is that you can lock it down so that nobody can edit it, which is fine. Occasionally you might want to have that. But other times you shouldn't always restrict that. Employees have their own personalities, their own way of writing, their own kind of voice when it comes to content. And their audiences are smart. They're going to know if the voice is marketing jargon or sales jargon. And not that they won't necessarily interact with it, because if you have great copywriters in your team, it doesn't matter. But if you're just throwing together like a one sentence message that just reads like a PR line, people understand that and they recognize that and they know it's not your voice. So it's more authentic when it comes from somebody who maybe uses emojis a lot more than others. Maybe someone uses more humor in their voice. Let them do that. You might want to provide some guidelines for sure. You could put hashtags for disclosures like, I work for so-and-so company hashtag, or these views are my own. If you're worried, especially, understandable, like regulated industries have different views on that. But social media is changing and organizations need to change. It's no longer just okay to sound like a big PR stunt. People want authenticity, and those who are adopting early on are reaping the rewards big time. And again, this also comes back to providing guidance and training around social media, because again, it's hard to let everybody just post whatever they want. But if you train people and they go through your process, it gets them in the right mindset. And you have to think about too, like using a program as a hub, right? There's visibility into what people are sharing and creating. So people are less likely to do damage this way, right? We have not ever really seen anybody do something horribly wrong on social media by using employee advocacy, because there's accountability here. And the companies are using their training tools and are using the features to make sure people understand that. And those typically who want to share and create content through the program aren't there to talk bad about their company. That usually happens if, they leave the company for some reason, or they've experienced, some kind of issue with leadership or something. Sometimes those things, grievances, can be put out on social. But at that point, if it's not part of the program. So, those are some of the mistakes that we have seen. And there's a lot of ways to kind of combat that too. And I don't want to go too in depth here, because otherwise this podcast will be extremely long. So again, I highly recommend you read our blog post about this. It covers it a lot more in depth. But here's some ways you can avoid program failure. Just some of our tips that we've seen. And again, you can bring this up on any of our calls. We're happy to go through it and help explain it further. But one of the ways to avoid these kind of mistakes and really have just a great adoption and great results of the program. So one, follow the 1%, 9%, 90% rule. So this idea actually comes from B2C social media, but it applies to anything, on social really. And what it breaks down is that 1% of the content creators, 9% are your engagers, and then 90% are the consumers. So creating a successful employee advocacy program at scale really requires you to address each of these groups. And then it helps you to understand how each of these categories operate and what engages them in the internal social program. So most advocacy tools address only the 9%, those engagers, but they generally fail to even get that group because the 1% and the 90% are represented, right? So social community that doesn't support the 1% or the 90% just never becomes a community, period. So you have to think about it this way, and that'll help mold the program itself. Two, you have to start with employees. Put your employees first. You can't require them to create or share content, and you can't force people to participate in this program, but you can incentivize them to do so. So example, again, is always showing them the benefits of what getting involved can lead to, right? It helps their personal brand. They grow their own networks. This gives them more professional opportunities. Maybe they get invited to webinars, to podcasts, to speaking events, more career opportunities for them to grow either within their company, or they might even eventually get offers to go to other companies. And that's okay. Stifling people from growing does more harm in the long run than allowing them to grow and maybe move on to a different career. But even if they do move on to a different company, because you've encouraged them and been so part of their growth, they're going to be thankful. They might even still shout shout out your company on social even after they move on. That's important. And then plus word of mouth. If you're looking to grow and hire, they might help promote your company and say, hey, it's a great place to work. You can't force employee advocacy to happen in an authentic way. It just has to come naturally by prioritizing your employee needs and educating them on the value. And again, each employee has their own personal views on social media and how they use it. Some will be interested, in building a community or their personal brand or other professionals, and others might not be, but they might still be consumers of information, which is still important. The key is to understand your people, their interests, and their social media knowledge to ensure your program will appeal to them. Some of the things you can do, just kind of a bonus tip there too, is you could survey your employees, discover their views and interests, and create these kind of employee personas around what kind of content you want to flow in. And a great place to start too is to identify current brand ambassadors and employee influencers, those who are already pretty active on social media. These are employees who actually can help your advocacy efforts, maybe lead the way or be a part of the program in the beginning stages to really get the engine moving. So kind of as mentioned too, engagement is an important piece of employee advocacy. So we like to say that you should prioritize engagement over sharing in the start of your program. You still want them to share content, and it'll always be an important aspect, but employee advocacy success is based on how often and how long your people are going to share. So what brings them back month after month to consume, to interact, and to share? And as the person looking to implement a program, what would bring you back, and what do you think would be important that would keep your attention to a program? So keeping your people engaged with a consistent flow of content and information, as well as encouraging community, is what leads to the most and best sharing opportunities. Without that consistent engagement, your program is just going to struggle to provide results. So always be thinking about engagement. We also like to encourage user-to-user interactions. So one of the important things is this community mindset approach to employee advocacy. This is a great way to organize your people in one central location so that they can access company content information, but also an ideal way for employees to connect and interact with each other. People want to engage with things that they see their colleagues engage with, and they want to join the conversation. It's kind of this idea of FOMO, right? You start seeing more and more of your colleagues or coworkers doing things or engaging, creating. You're like, hey, that's a good idea. I kind of want to be part of this conversation. And it's good for the organization because engagement ensures that information is actually being consumed. It helps people feel more connected to their work and just encourages more employees to get involved. So supporting user-to-user interactions is what we see as key to driving activation and engagement in the program. And again, it's kind of why most programs, at least should, just like EveryoneSocial, we have these features like user notifications, email, newsletter, and push notifications, these colleague referrals, messaging and tagging capabilities, being able to follow and connect with fellow colleagues who are sharing and creating content. And I love that this concept too. We have a great podcast episode that came from our employee advocacy event from Ronnie Mania over at Adobe, who really is an advocate for how it fosters workplace community and how an advocacy program really does that. So it's a great listen. Definitely recommend go checking that out as well. Another thing you can do is really focus on taking advantage of user-generated content. So, again, you're going to have company content. You're going to have required groups of news for information that employees should have access to. But one of the best ways to drive engagement and results through shares is the power of user-generated content. And we have seen it over and over and over again. The real magic of social media in the workplace happens when you give your people the tools to create their own content. Again, you're going to have guidelines in place, like a social media policy or automatic disclosures and shares, but you should encourage your people to use their authentic voice in their shares and create content or add content. Why? Because you don't know who's going to create the next piece of viral content. Plus, user-generated content tends to outperform all the forms of content advocacy programs. We have a ton of stats around this too. I mean, anytime we have an employee sharing or creating something, about the organization, their work, snapping an image of something. We had a few who had gotten basketball jerseys of their employee number at EveryoneSocial, like when they were hired. And those have performed really, really well for us and really helps us reach more people. And we also had a user-generated content video about hiring from our head of people and recruiting, and that generated thousands of views. The other thing to do is to bring sharing to where your people already are. So look, your company definitely is using a few technologies and probably has multiple platforms. And when you want to add another one to the mix, sometimes there can be this collective sigh or annoyance from employees, and we get it too. But that's why you want to select a tool if you're going to do employee advocacy that integrates with your technologies that people already use, right? Maybe some of your employees prefer using Slack or Microsoft Teams to engage with information or get their content. Maybe there's a select group of employees who are very focused on their email inbox and kind of ignore Slack and Microsoft Teams. Maybe you have employees who are very mobile focused, right? Or maybe you're on the front lines, so the apps and things on their phone are more important. Or maybe it's as simple as like marketing and sales is in Salesforce all day and they don't want to come out of that program. So regardless of what your preferences are, what your team's preferences are, that's why, for example, we built these things that have smooth applications integrations for these channels. And EveryoneSocial can be used in Salesforce. You don't ever have to leave Salesforce to use it. So you want to bring where people are. Sometimes manually people want to set this up, and it can work if you're a smaller team, but it can get overwhelming too with spreadsheets and slacking everybody to please share this or do that. But if you have all these things integrated in one, it makes it really easy for you to quickly just select these things you want to happen and let it disperse to the people where they are. And you're making people's lives a lot easier. So not everyone's going to always log in to an advocacy program every day, but if you're hitting them in these other channels, they're still going to be able to share and interact with content and still be a part of the program, which is fantastic. Another thing you want to do is sharing the rewards. So rewarding your people and valuing employee recognition are huge driving factors in getting people excited about work initiatives, and especially when you're able to highlight your peers. So when people engage with and share your employee advocacy program and they drive value for your organization, reward them for those actions and the value they bring and the content they're creating. So by having key stakeholders, leadership, or program admins highlight and reward these team members for their participation, encourages more employees to get involved. Plus, on top of that, when you're showing them how it benefits their personal brands and careers, you just have a giant winning combination for engagement and growth. We've seen it all too. It could be as simple as highlighting employees and then posting about them on socials. It can be an internal thing where you reward them for certain actions. You can use the gamification leaderboard in a program to drive attention, whether that's rewarding them with gift cards or lunches or tickets to concerts or just work initiatives, right? There's so many different things you can do in so many different ways. So think creatively about it. Now, you also want to be careful. It's not all about the gamification, because then you could have some people who are trying to take advantage and just using this as an opportunity to spam to try to get up on the leaderboard points. But typically we don't see that very often, especially if you approach this with a strategic mindset, let's say. And then lastly, the ones that we've seen just do really successfully is they make it part of their culture and onboarding from day one. When you bring on a program, it might be a cultural shift because you haven't done this before, but start to embed it into the culture, into the missions, into the values, right? When you have new hires, onboard the tool and the process in there so people who are new get it right away and are getting involved. Again, we've had customers who say to their employees, look, we're a social media company. Community is part of our company culture, and we encourage every employee to get involved and be a part of the brand voice. And that mindset and support from leadership, it creates a culture of engagement and sharing right away. And then when new hires join the team, onboard them on, show them why the company relies on advocacy and how they're important to success for not only their own brands, but the company brand. And give them some basic social media training. It doesn't have to be extremely overwhelming. It can be pretty straightforward, but when you do this, you set the tone from day one and continue to drive that culture of social amplification. So there you have it. The common mistakes and assumptions that sometimes people new to employee advocacy and social amplification make, and some ways that you can avoid these pitfalls. We want to make sure everybody is successful. And as everyone explores this strategy and really thinks about this into this year and hopefully into the future, we know it's going to be important and continue to be important. There's so many benefits out there for this if done correctly. And more people are putting more thought into this. And it's an exciting time because we have been saying this since 2011, 2012. And as it's slowly grown over the years, it's exciting to see that businesses are becoming more modern and they really understand the power of social. So hopefully all this made sense. Hopefully you learned something from here. Would love to continue the conversation via social media, or you can reach out to our team if you have more questions. Again, we have a blog post about this that covers everything in more detail. So definitely go check that out. But until next time, we'll see you later.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with more engagement insights. Want to know how EveryoneSocial can provide you with the tools needed to keep everyone at your company connected, informed, creating, and sharing? Visit EveryoneSocial.com to learn more.